Okay, ladies and gentlemen, and we are live. Well, we've got some big news out today. I had to even get my best suit out for this one because it is very professional finance content that we're going to be talking about. However, I'm going to take all the boring stuff and the figures and statistics and just make this really simple so that you know what you need to be aware of, because there is some pretty big warnings out at the moment. In fact, big would be an understatement. Huge warnings out from the banking sector. And although this is predominantly the USA, so if you're watching from other areas, there's definitely a lot of lessons that you can learn from what's going on in the US right now. There's some really, really serious stuff going on. Not just to mention, I was making my monthly macro video in the private community over the weekend. And one of the things that's happening in the US, which is different to some of the other countries where the GDP is sort of flatlining in other countries, the US has been dropping. And this is even with all of the currency creation that they've been doing. So this is alarming, actually, with the debt levels increasing as well, personal debt levels. But I want to focus on this video on three things predominantly. One of them is the main warning that's just come out from the FDIC, and we've got to get into that first because it's pretty serious. The second one we're going to look at is what this judge has just said about 20 million deposits being at risk, which I mean, staggering. I couldn't believe it when I saw this. And the last one is about legal tender, gold and silver being made legal tender. So let's go through all of these articles then, and I'll show you exactly what's going on and get you up to date and up to speed with the most important finance stuff. You'll notice I try and not just focus predominantly on finance anymore every single video, because I think it gets a bit boring after a while if every single video is just me talking about finance. That's why I like to bring in geopolitical and food and all the other things that are going on around the world. So please let me know in the comments here. I will check the comments if you prefer it if I actually bring in all this other stuff, or do you just want strictly finance? Hopefully not, because my eyes glaze over after a while of finance every single day. So let's look at this then. 517, if you've never seen a number this big, that's billion, by the way. That's $500 billion US dollars in unrealized losses hits the US banking system. The FDIC has just said 63 lenders on the brink of insolvency. Now, as usual, they never tell you who these lenders are. I've made videos on who I think about a dozen of them are. You can find that on the channel. So I know who I think about a dozen of these lenders are, but I don't know who the other 50 banks are. So that means now I've got to do a big research project and find out who these other 50 banks are so that I can bring you up to speed if this is one of your banks, because we don't want that. So this was their, let's go through this then. This is what I'll read it out because I know it's small and the way they've structured it, I can't make this any larger. So I'll read it for you. Unrealized losses on available for sale and held to maturity securities increased by 39 billion to 500 billion in the first quarter. So what does this mean? Higher unrealized losses on residential mortgage-backed securities. We haven't talked about this for a couple of years, but this is where the Fed or banks basically own security. So the Federal Reserve can basically buy your mortgage. That is what an MBS is. It's a mortgage-backed security. And you remember, actually, let's just talk about this for a second. This was one of those videos I made that went viral was it over 1 million views or something many, many years ago? Because at that time, I think it was a few years back now, no one even knew this. No one knew that a huge portion of all mortgages in the USA were actually not held by the banks. That's what everyone thought. They were held by the Federal Reserve. And this was such a shocking development that in such a short space of time, things started to shift very, very quickly. So I just couldn't believe that I stumbled upon that in the first place, that all of these mortgage-backed securities were held by the Federal Reserve, everyone's everyone's mortgages. Now, of course, they've reduced this now and taken all these other measures, but it was shocking, I think, to most people at the time. So what else have they said then? This is the 9th straight quarter of unusually high losses, keyword unrealized, I better add, losses, since the Federal Reserve began to raise interest rates in the first quarter of 2022. So let me add another point here then. What is an unrealized loss? This means that the bank, it's also what you might call a paper loss. So the banks have all of these, what they consider to be assets, but some of them are now liabilities. They have all these assets on their balance sheet. So let's say a building was $1 million, right, or 100 million. Well, what's happened now is, let's say it's gone down to 50 million from 100 million. Well, that is what's known as an unrealized loss, because you only realize the loss if you actually sell that asset. So this is what's going on at the moment. They're already, hundreds of banks actually, are already bankrupt. They just don't know it yet, but they are bankrupt. And I'll tell you what will cause it. Make a note of this, remember this. This is the warning sign for you. If you see people start doing bank runs to get their money out of the bank, and it doesn't have to be physical cash at branches, it can be just doing withdrawals online. If you see this happening, beware. Be very, very wary, because as soon as people begin the bank runs, these banks are going to collapse. There'll be, and again, when I say these banks, I don't mean the whole banking system, obviously, but there will be a number of banks that will collapse because the losses are unrealized, but when people start pulling out their cash, they have to sell assets in order to then give people their money or for the withdrawals. So I'm oversimplifying it here, but that is what you need to be aware of. As soon as you see this happening, run. The next tier of banks, again, this is an FDIC document. I'm not paraphrasing or anything. This is exactly from them. The next tier of banks, those with total assets between $10 billion and $250 billion in assets, is also showing some stress in non-owner occupied CRE loans. Weak demand for office space is softening, they love this word, property values, and higher interest rates are affecting the credit quality and refinancing ability of office and other types of CRE loans. As a result, the non-current rate for non-owner occupied CRE loans is now at its highest level since the fourth quarter of 2013. So that's over a decade ago. Next, driven by write-downs on credit cards, the industry's quarterly net charge-off rate remained at 0.65%. The current net charge-off rate is 17 basis points higher than pre-pandemic average. The credit card net charge-off rate was the highest rate since third quarter of 2011, so over 13 years ago. Estimated, here we go. Estimated uninsured deposits increased 63 billion. Uninsured deposits increased 63 billion in the quarter, representing the first reported increase since the fourth quarter of 2021. The number of banks on the problem list, so this is a rating of 4 or 5, increased from 52. This is in one single quarter, from 52 to 63. So it went up, 20% in one single quarter. And we're just getting started. If you think it's raised 20% in one quarter, what do you think is going to happen over the next year? How many more banks? And this is the reason why. These loans are coming up for refinance now. What's going to happen? I can't see a way out of this. Honestly, I'm pretty good at math and I'm pretty good at finance and economics and forecasting. I honestly can't see a way out of this problem. There's potentially one thing that the Fed could do, but this will result in more quantitative easing, more inflation. They won't want to do it because it's going to affect their fight against inflation. They think they're winning. Try not to laugh too hard. They think they're winning this fight against inflation because of all their measures. Nothing to do with all the energy prices coming down. But either way, this is a disaster just waiting to happen. The next thing is Total assets held by problem banks increased by 15 billion to 82 billion during the quarter. The deposit insurance fund, here we go, was 125 billion on March 31st. Do you realize what that means? So that means their reserve ratio, if you know how much money, the trillions that are in US banks, that means, and here it is in black and white, the reserve ratio is just 1.17%. The reserve ratio currently remains on track to reach the 1.35% minimum reserve by 2028. Look, this is in black and white here. That is the reserve ratio. That's how much they've got to cover all of the money in US banks. Please fact check this, because I always get people leave silly comments. Oh, there's no possible way. That would be illegal. There's no way that would happen. It's here. This is, look, FDIC.gov, 1.17%. That is all they've got to cover all of the money in US bank accounts. It's unbelievable. Now then, I want to take you on to the next part. This is from Forbes. This has just come out. A judge says up to 20 million fintech depositors, so these are people who have got, the modern day bank accounts, the fintech accounts, are at risk from this bankruptcy. Tens of thousands of customers have already lost access to more than $114 million of their own funds. And I know a lot of you have already emailed in and left comments to say that you have been hit by this, but there doesn't seem to be a crazy amount of coverage around this. They're really trying to keep this quiet. 20 million depositors. Do you realize how many people that is? That is a staggering amount of people. CNBC then, let's give you a proper source here. Savings App CEO says 85,000 accounts are locked in fintech meltdown. So this isn't the 20 million. I'm just going to give you a conservative amount here. And you notice I didn't even put this as a title. 20 million depositors. I just said something like 63 banks. I'm trying to keep this as conservative as possible here. We never imagined a scenario like this. This is what the CEO has said. For 3 weeks, 85,000 Yotta customers with a combined 112 million in savings have been locked out of their accounts. The CEO and founder told CNBC the disruption caused by a dispute between the middleman Synapse. I'm surprised they use middleman there. Oh, is that gender neutral language? Synapse and Tennessee-based Evolve Bank and Trust has upended lives. We never imagined a scenario like this could play out and that no regulator would step in and help. By the way, I'm obviously joking about the gender neutral language. I don't do any of that myself. But when the co-founded fintech startup named Yotta, he wanted to give Americans a new way to save money to help them cushion the ups and downs of life. Well, that hasn't worked out too well. The crisis began May 11th when a dispute between two of the partners, this was Synapse and Evolve Bank and Trust, led to the lockup of accounts at Yotta and at least 24 other startups. They declared bankruptcy earlier this year. So for the past 3 weeks then, these accounts have been locked. This is, and here's another thing I want you to pay attention to, and I've given this advice before. I've been reading all of these comments over and over again. There's loads, you can see all this stuff. There's loads of these comments. And people are saying, oh, I've been locked out of my account for 3 weeks. All of my money was in this one account. I couldn't buy groceries. I couldn't pay my rent. I couldn't pay my mortgage. Now that's affected my credit rating, etc. The advice I always give is do not just have one bank account. You should really have an emergency fund anyway of up to 3 months of expenses. This is nothing new. I've been saying this for years. But you never just want to have one bank account. Maybe have a different bank account that has your emergency fund in it for 3 months worth of expenses. And then that way you will never get into this situation. It says, in fact, I don't even know the number. Was it tens of thousands or more? People are in this situation now where they just can't access their bank account. And the judge says it's going to be a long time yet. So all these accounts are basically frozen. It reminds me of the Great Depression. Remember the diary series I did, where people's accounts were locked. Some people for up to 2 years, they couldn't get their money out of the bank. It kind of reminds me of that, even though it's only been 3 weeks. The stories are heartbreaking. We never imagined this could happen. And look, we worked with member banks, okay? But the FDIC would not step in to help. It says it here. We worked with banks and members of the FDIC. No regulator would step in and help. Now, it's also these other ones, Juno and Copper. I don't use these, so I don't really know much about them. But it said they offered savings accounts for families and teens. And these have also been frozen. So they're calling it a non-systemic meltdown here. 200,000, this is what they're estimating, total customer accounts with balances are locked. 10 million end users. I mean, this is unbelievable that this is happening. The judge says this, I don't know who's right or wrong. We know how much money came into the system and we're certain that's the correct number. The money doesn't just disappear. It has to be somewhere. Well, actually, money can disappear, but no, there will be a chain. There will be a flow, so you can find out where the money has gone. But money disappears all the time, by the way. Look at these government budgets. The problem appears to primarily involve customers with direct brokerage accounts, which they were involuntarily transferred into last year. The companies claiming these are federally insured through partner banks. Consumer advocates have warned that brokerage accounts aren't meant to work this way. Because so much of this is unregulated, federal officials have been unable to step in to, help out the customers, etc. Yeah, there's no sign of this being resolved anytime soon. But on a positive note, though, let's look at some good, happy news here. Louisiana reaffirms gold and silver as legal tender. Good on you, Louisiana. If you're in Louisiana, drop a comment below. So what's happened? The governor has signed a new law reaffirming gold and silver as legal tender, making a symbolic statement in favor of sound money principles. The Senate Bill 232, sponsored by Senator Abraham, marks the 6th pro-sound money bill passed by a state this year. What does that tell you? What does that tell you, ladies and gents? Their sound money bill simply affirms that any gold or silver coin, specie or bullion issued by the United States government is considered legal tender whenever voluntarily agreed upon by both parties to a contract. The measure enjoyed popular support, receiving only one no vote on the floor. Who was that? Was that the Federal Reserve? I wonder, was it the Federal Reserve chair? Someone that prints all the currency? Someone would have voted no on that. America's 53-year experiment in a purely fiat currency system has gone poorly. Well, not really. It's actually gone very well for America. Americans are the richest on the planet. As you know, I'm making a new course at the moment, and I was going through and writing a lot of stuff today. And one thing that was very surprising was just how much wealth Americans have compared to the rest of the world. I mean, it was staggering. And even when you look at the bulk being owned by Americans and Canadians, even within this sector, the numbers even blew my mind. I'm going to put it all in the new course so you can see all this, because it's part of the context aspect. And you think how much wealth there is in America. This many people here owned the bulk of this wealth. I mean, so when you look at it on a larger scale for the world, really it's like that many people own this much of the world's wealth. It was mind-blowing to me to discover this. I knew it was a lot, but I didn't know it was that much. What else have we got? Alabama, Utah, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Kentucky also passed legislation in 2024. So this was ending sales and capital gain tax on precious metals, and they declared the CBDCs are not valid money in their state. This will be very interesting how it actually plays out. So whose classes gold and silver as illegal? How it can be illegal, I have no idea. And who says it's legal? Well, here are the states. Oh gosh, this is going to test my geography here. Here we go. So we've got Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma, Kansas, Louisiana, Texas, Tennessee, West Virginia, Indiana, South Carolina. Okay, I've got them all. Okay, that deserves a thumbs up for that from my American friends. Do you know, there's probably a lot of Americans that don't even know all the states, actually. So, what's just broken though? Biden has vetoed a bill that would allow highly regulated financial firms to custody Bitcoin and crypto. So this is a big one. I think, you would think that he needs all the votes that he can get. You really would. And yet he's just vetoed this crypto bill that the banks want, the crypto industry wants, the fintech wants. I mean, I don't get it at all. So he's just vetoed, and this is, I think, the only bill that's ever crossed his desk on crypto. It's baffling. Maybe he was asleep and they just passed it. Maybe they literally passed it across his desk, and they said he's asleep. Okay, that's a veto. I mean, I don't know why he would veto that when he needs as many votes as he can get, and he's obviously going to lose votes from this now. Not that I think he's going to win anyway in November. Sorry if you are voting that way. I think that the chances are very, very low of him pulling this one off. But there we go. That's you up to date on the finance aspect. I will see you again next time. Not sure which day yet. We still got the races going on down here, so it's pretty crazy. But apart from that, I will see you next time. Take care. God bless.